It's the tale of two races and their timelines. On the one hand, there's the race to prevent Iran from getting the bomb. It's top of the agenda this Tuesday at the UN Atomic Agency, where diplomats tell the Associated Press of new intelligence that shows that Iran is intent on nuclear warheads. The other race is the race for president in the United States. The incumbents caught in a close battle in states like Florida, where the pro-Israel vote could make a big difference. While the clock ticks on the U.S. election, Israel is pressing the Obama administration to commit to what Prime Minister Netanyahu calls a red line on Iran, beyond which Washington backs Israeli airstrikes. Two competing timelines, two questions. Does Netanyahu have the upper hand these days on Obama, and will Israel strike Iran? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the Iran time bomb, and with us from Tel Aviv, Mayor Javan Dafar, thank you for being with us again here in the debate. You're with MiPass.
Thank you.
Also with us here in the studio, we have Rouzbeh Parsi, Senior Fellow at the European Institute for Security Studies. Also with us is Douglas Herbert, France 24 International Affairs Editor, and Laurie Dunton of the Truman National Security Project. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for weighing in on the conversation, and you have on the France 24 Debate Facebook page, and on Twitter you can find us at FrancoisF24. Now, it's fair to say that Benjamin Netanyahu and Barack Obama have never really hit it off. Their working relationship began with the acrimony over Washington's failed efforts to kickstart Palestinian peace talks. Lately, both sides seem to be getting over it. In the past days, however, there's been a bit of a flare-up. Confirmation in the Israeli press these past days of Netanyahu telling U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro he's at, quote, wit's end over what his administration sees as President Obama's unwillingness to provide red lines in the effort to stop Iran's nuclear program. The row, by the way, has since gone public.
It is not useful to be parsing it, to be setting deadlines one way or the other, red lines. It is most important that we stay intensely focused on the pressure on Iran, the opportunity for Iran to fix this situation through the diplomacy that we've offered, and intensive consultations with Israel and all the other regional states.
The world tells Israel, wait, there's still time. And I say, wait for what? Wait until when? Those in the international community who refuse to put red lines before Iran don't have a moral right to place a red light before Israel.
Mayor Javan Dafar, why at this particular moment in time are the Israelis and the Americans airing their differences in public?
I think there seems to be a view in Jerusalem, it seems to me, that they think, the Netanyahu administration thinks that President Obama is not as serious as Prime Minister Netanyahu about stopping a nuclear Iran. They want him to basically to go further than before. We shouldn't forget that President Obama at the AIPAC speech said that when it comes to Iran, the United States has no containment policy, which basically means that the United States is not going to allow the Iranian government to become a nuclear power. However, that seems that it wasn't enough for Prime Minister Netanyahu. He wants Mr. Obama to set a red line and a deadline, basically to tell the Iranians that if by this time the Iranians are not going to comply, then there could be military action. And also he wants a more clear red line as well, so to tell the Iranians that if you start doing X, Y, and Z, then the United States will take military action against you.
Laurie Dunton, if the Israeli Prime Minister presses the case, is he going to get his way? Or is the U.S. going to provide him with that red line, whatever that is?
I think there'll be the U.S. administration navigating very carefully to try to avoid locking themselves into anything now or 8 weeks from now when the U.S. election occurs. They want to maintain as much freedom throughout these difficult negotiations where they're constantly trying to pull as much leverage as they can with the Iranians. It's not just the game of how the U.S. and Israel line up, but Tehran is watching what comes out of Washington the next 8 weeks up to the election, trying to anticipate whether or not they need to move before early November, whether they're going to have more relaxed leader in the White House, a tougher leader in the White House, more orientation towards military strikes, and the U.S. needs to maintain some flexibility now.
Douglas Herbert?
Yeah, no, well, first of all, Netanyahu, I mean, he's being a very savvy, wily politician, and he does very well, in his fluent American accented English. He has experience in the U.S. He knows that political scene very well, and he has been very openly, has made no secret of it, going right over Obama's head, appealing to the real Tea Party core of the Republican Party and to the base of extremely pro-Israeli lobbies in the U.S. He knows basically that Obama, it will be at least in the next month or two in a very, very, as Laurie was saying, weak position or delicate position with respect to these Republicans who are basically going to be, Mitt Romney is going to be doing everything possible to make Obama look very weak on this issue, make Obama, as he once said, look like he's throwing Israel off the bus. And Obama, remember, those swing states, you have Florida is a very big one, a lot of Jewish voters, a lot of elderly Jewish voters there. So very tricky politics here. Netanyahu is playing it like a guitar. I mean, he really, really has calculated the sort of political balance here.
Is he playing it like a guitar, Rusbeh Parsi?
Well, obviously, I agree. But of course, the question is if he's not also playing with fire. Because I think it's not just a question of whether Netanyahu is just using this threat to leverage pressure against the Obama administration. It's also a question of his own credibility. Because he's now been building up Iran as this kind of dire existential threat for 10, 15 years. And that's not a water tap you can just turn off whenever you decide that it's not that important anymore. So he will have to answer to his own electorate as well regarding what this threat is and what there is to do about it.
His own electorate, Meyer, which is divided, it seems.
Well, in Israel right now there is a lot of discussion in public domain. Every other week you can set your watch by it. There's another former intelligence official, former military official, former politician who dealt with security issues coming out and saying an attack against the Iranian regime at this time would be very counterproductive. I must emphasize that one of the few consensus issues that we have in Israel, and that's thanks to the Iranian government, is that nobody in this country wants this regime to have nuclear weapons. This includes people who think that it would be an existential threat and those who don't think it would be an existential threat. But there is a great debate and great opposition to the way Prime Minister Netanyahu is handling this issue. We must remember, Francois, that it's Mr. Romney on Sunday, on Meet the Press, flat out refused to set out red lines when it comes to Iran. He was asked at Meet the Press about what are his red lines when it comes to Iran, and he refused it. So my concern is that, first of all, 8 weeks is not going to change the world. Second of all, we are going to damage our relations with our greatest ally, which is President Obama's administration has helped Israel more militarily than President Bush did in cash and equipment. And in 4 years, President Obama has caused more damage to the Iranian regime than Mr. Bush did in 8 years. And to go against him like this is going to damage our relationship with his administration. And more importantly, the way we are speaking now towards the Americans, what if Romney is elected? Are we going to put the same pressure on him as well, considering the fact that he has also refused to set out red line when it comes to Iran? What we must do in Israel, and I think this is becoming the consensus issue, is that to take the local politics and our relations with America and the bad blood basically between Mr. Netanyahu and Obama out of the Iranian question and focus on what is happening and to deal with Iran on the basis of basically the international consensus, which at this time is on the side of Israel.
Laurie Dundon?
I just wanted to add something that has been pointed out about, if there is a Romney administration that comes in, there's also going to be a clock ticking there. They're going to need time, even if Romney wants to come out, as he said, and be tougher than President Obama on the issue of Iran, stand closer to Israel than Obama has, when actually there's not a great deal of difference between their two positions. But even if he does want to come into office emboldened, That doesn't happen right away in November. He doesn't get into office until late January. There's a transition. Then there's very likely going to be a policy review of some months to decide where they're going in their Iran strategy. Romney has emphasized that he wants to be bold, but also that he's very careful and graduated in how he makes a move. So if there's a view from Israel looking for a new President Romney to change the calculus suddenly from Washington, that's not likely to come. And if you don't think it's likely to come, then maybe you shouldn't gamble everything right now.
All right, since last week's Democratic convention, Barack Obama, by the way, has gotten a bit of a bump in the polls. Little bump. It's all very close still. The Republicans with lots of money, 8 weeks to go, as Lori was saying, and you can see toss-up states, the ones that are in white. One of those states in particular looms large, Florida, 29 electoral votes. Last week at the convention, Barack Obama not only pledged that America would always have Israel's back, he personally insisted that the Democratic Party platform include Jerusalem as capital of the Jewish state. Now, that triggered a mix of booing, applause, confusion on the convention floor. There was less confusion at the Republican convention the previous week, where Mitt Romney sounded resolutely hawkish.
Every American is less secure today because he has failed to slow Iran's nuclear threat. In his first TV interview as president, he said we should talk to Iran. We're still talking, and Iran's centrifuges are still spinning. President Obama has thrown allies like Israel under the bus, even as he has relaxed sanctions on Castro's Cuba.
Douglas Herbert.
Well, I'm just going to point out here. These are political sound bites on, pitching basically in the fever pitch of an election season. It's interesting. There was a poll recently done in Chicago, actually, showing that I think it was 70% of Americans would oppose or actually against a unilateral strike by the United States. Even if Iran were to continue.
So why the tough talk?
Without Security Council authorization right now, because the thing is, there's a perception that it is going to get votes. There are a lot of voters out there who are looking for the tough talk on Iran. They like the tough talk. There's a big perception out there that Obama is weak on this issue. Romney's basically going to hit on any issue. He's going to hammer away at any issue where there's a perceived weakness with Obama. Whether or not that's borne out by the facts of the policy and what he's done, whether or not that's borne out by, as we were hearing earlier, that, actually Obama has actually done more to hurt Iran and to help Israel militarily over the past 4 years of his presidency than George W. Bush did. That all becomes irrelevant in the fever pitch of an election season when you're out there on hustings, on the campaign trail, making these pitches. People like the sound bites, and unfortunately, poll after poll shows they often do work, factual or not.
Rusbeh Parsi?
I'd perhaps go one step further and say, if you look at the Republican campaign against President Obama, it's been, shall we say, fact-challenged. Because often they really, it's somewhat outlandish, both when it comes to Iran and other things. So on the one hand, it's a question of them being able and willing to go really beyond what you can even factually claim. The other problem, of course, is that the Obama administration has been spectacularly bad at even selling their own victories when they have them. So the perception then rules that somehow they're weak on all kinds of things or can't get stuff done. And if you look at it, that's not really the case.
But Rusbeh, isn't it a case where the American voters want tough talk on Iran? They want a tougher line on Iran. And by the way, not just Jewish voters. There are a lot of pro-Israel people who aren't Jewish in the United States.
That's true. But I think perhaps to some degree, we're also allowing ourselves to be misled because we're talking about strikes. But the point is that this is not what it's going to be. No matter how you game it, the question is who is going to be able to contain this conflict. This is not a question of Israelis or Americans sending a couple of jet fighters, dropping a few bombs, and somehow the Iranians are just going to stand by and let it happen. If you look at it from a national security point of view, everyone is going to be compelled to show that they can deter an enemy. So the Iranians are going to do something. And then the Israelis, of course, are going to be compelled to show that they can defend themselves. And then you have the spiral going. And the question is, who is going to be able to contain that? And I don't really see anyone being able to do that.
All right, you can feel that political divide on Twitter, for instance. The U.S. political divide, of course, we're talking about. Here's what Jen from Orange County tweeted a little while earlier. Iran's centrifuges keep spinning all the while the Obama administration bluffs and predicts when they might help. Laurie Dunton, that perception issue, is the Obama administration going to perhaps lean a bit backwards if it's a close race in the final weeks there?
Well, on Iran specifically, I think they've actually taken not only factually great strides in trying to demonstrate they've taken tough actions through sanctions on Iran, but the Iranians have responded to the squeeze, and the squeeze is just now beginning to hurt.
When you saw that switch on the convention floor on the issue of Jerusalem, did that seem a little bit like pandering?
I think they took out something that had traditionally been in the platform, and putting it back in was not so shocking as much as the process through which the error had occurred or the disagreement had occurred so publicly. So I didn't see the platform change as that much of a dramatic statement. I do think it is interesting that amongst the various foreign policy issues where there is disagreement, there's only room for a couple foreign policy topics to really reach the mass audience in the heat of the election campaign, as Doug has just said, and when the main focus is on the economy. It's the election in the U.S. is largely an issue, an evaluation of the economy. So what reaches the top? Potentially the war on terror and Iran, and about two things have hit the top, and that's it. So there's a very small margin of discussion, and it's all about election talking points, evaluating your successes, and trying to keep the ball rolling so that until the election and the day after, the hard work of implementing sanctions, tightening loopholes, putting the squeeze on Iran in negotiations, and all the complicated policy elements can continue on.
Meir Javandafar, at the outset, we mentioned that now public row between Netanyahu and the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Are you surprised that this came up?
I'm surprised and I'm quite concerned because I'm worried about the damage that it might cause to our relations with the United States. I must also add, François, I think Mr. Netanyahu's tough talk today, which basically told the world that they don't have a moral to tell Israel what to do, I think it's also energized and brought about by a recent report, and this is my opinion, in Haaretz, that Ehud Barak no longer supports the option of attacking Iran. Yossi Werter in Haaretz wrote a very extensive article about this, that Barak has changed his mind. This puts Netanyahu in a corner now, further into a corner. He's much more on his own. And I think in order to energize his supporters even more now that his side of the argument is weaker, we're going to probably hear more such statements that he made today. And just one thing, Laurie was talking about the economy being so important in the US elections. Like I think during the Clinton administration, he put a sign above his campaign saying it's the economy stupid, which was basically the slogan for his campaign, that he wanted to solve the economy. That phrase also applies to dealing with Iran. Mr. Romney and others say that while President Obama talks, the centrifuges in Iran are spinning. Yes, they're spinning. And if the Iranian regime did a calculation how much each spin cost, it would realize that it's conducting one of the most economically damaging operations on its territory, which is, if it continues unabated, could turn those centrifuges and the economic cost that they bring to a regime to make them into a bigger danger for the survival of the Islamic Republic than to the security of the State of Israel. While the regime continues with its current policy, it is taking itself into basically into the economic abyss, and it's becoming much more a situation of, I think it could reach in 2 or 3 years a situation of survival for the regime. So while everybody's talking about the issue of strike, we must realize that this is the most crucial issue when it comes to dealing with the Iranian nuclear program.
And we're going to take a closer look inside of how Iran is reacting to all of this when we return. This is the France 24 debate.